started.
Okay, welcome everybody to the July meeting of Coordinating Overview and Scrutiny Committee, an informal meeting. So that's why we're doing it via Teams, because there's no key decisions being taken today. Thank you all for coming. We've got quite a lot of guest officers who I think we'll ask them to introduce themselves when they speak. But just let you know that it is being recorded and webcast, even though it's an online informal meeting, and it will be on the council's YouTube site, and that you can record and take photographs unless there are confidential or exempt items. Apologies, we've got you and Mackie. Any others, Emma?
I've not received any others, Chair.
Okay. Ewan's had to go back to school to pick up his son, so we wish him well. Declarations of interest, just to remind you that you must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed today. And if you do declare such an interest, then you cannot speak or take part in that agenda items, and they will be recorded in the minutes. Okay, we come on to a very important issue for the council. Committee chairs will be aware that we had a presentation before lockdown, I think BL, as it's now called, about some serious failings in City Council financial adherence to financial regulations. And as a result, CIPFA have been advising us on how we can improve. And we thought it appropriate to have an update presentation today. So I'm pleased to welcome Councillor Tristan Chatfield, Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources. We brought one or two members of the cavalry along in the shape of officers, Tristan. So I don't know who's going to start off and then who's going to pick up the mantle when you finished. But over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I will be. I'll do a quick intro if that's all right, Chair, with you, and then bring in Stuart from CIPFA, who can talk through more detail in the report. And we have got Sarah and Becky here as well from our own finance team as well to answer any questions that might come up. So yeah, as Chair mentioned, this comes off the back of a report that found us to be a one-star local authority in terms of our financial management processes. And so obviously off the back of that, and actually there was work ongoing anyway, but off the back of that, an improvement plan was put in place, and that's generated a huge amount of work, both for the finance team, but also for everyone across the organisation, all the budget holders in all the different directorates within the council. And really pleasingly, we are now have been found by CIPFA to be a three-star authority, which I think is extraordinary of degree of progress that we've made over the last year. And I think it's a testament to all the hard work that those officers have put in to get us there. And I've placed on record my thanks for CIPFA for kind of guiding us and showing us the path towards a better position. Obviously, I think it's probably even more extraordinary given the circumstances in which we're operating as well, given all the COVID thing. I think it's quite remarkable that through the leadership of Becky, we've managed to keep on track in terms of this improvement journey. So I think it's really welcome and actually ahead of time, because I think our plan, what we were hoping for, was to get there in 2 years, and we've actually got there in 1. So I think that again is a substantial achievement for the council. And I said that achievement belongs to the whole council. I think there are, I suppose, going forward, there's work to be done, and there's still obviously there's still an improvement programme in place, and we're still doing a huge amount of work around that, getting us to a point where we can be as sophisticated as we possibly can, given the sort of information we work with and the sort of stability of the sort of financial system in local government, which at best can be a bit ropey, dependent on government grants, etc. And of course the uncertainty around future COVID impact as well. So we are moving forward. This is a good news, but it's heart, there's some really good news around this, and I think it puts the council in a much better position. There are financial challenges coming down the road. COVID will have an impact going forward around loss of income, especially, and other things. And obviously there is still, as I said, significant uncertainty around local government finance and funding more generally anyway. But with that, I think I'll hand over to Stuart, if I can, who perhaps talk through a little bit more detail of the report itself.
Good morning. Thanks very much, Councillor Chatfield, for the background. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Stuart Fair.
Are you still on the west coast of Scotland?
No, just outside Stirling. Well, I don't know if that's west, but certainly right in the middle of Scotland this morning. The weather's pretty bonny, as they would say up here. But yes, thanks very much for the opportunity to present this morning. On behalf of CITFA, it's a real pleasure to be working with Birmingham City Council. I've worked in public financial management for nearly 38 years, and I've done about over 90 of these assessments. So it's really good to come back to an organisation that has picked up on some of the earlier work that we carried out. Between September 2018 and April 2019, we assessed Birmingham using a CITFA financial management model, 5-star model that we use globally. And at that time, in April 2019, we assessed Birmingham City Council as attaining a status of 1-star out of 5, with an average statement scoring of 1.91, which surprised us. We were confident in the assessment. We had sufficiency of evidence. We spent nearly 6 months compiling the assessment, so we thought we were on firm ground, but nevertheless it was certainly a shock to those in finance, a surprise anyway to those in finance at the time. It was we were asked to, as Councillor Chatfield alluded to, we were asked to reassess the City Council this year, and we did that between March and May of this year. And we effectively carried out the financial management capability review. I think it's on the first page, or the second page of the slide deck that's in front of you. Basically, same methodology as the first assessment, but we did a deeper dive into financial resilience. Many local authorities really struggle with balancing financial resilience with demands and income that is coming through the door at the moment. There's some authorities that are really struggling and distressed indeed. So along with a financial management review based on what we did in 2018-2019, we carried out a quick deep dive financial resilience review as well. So we'll package it together. It comes from the same sources of evidence. Could we go on to the next slide, please? In terms of financial resilience, we look at a number of things. We look at the adequacy of reserves. We look at the strength of medium-term financial planning, and we look at efficiency savings and transformational change, the ability to drive and achieve and reshape the organisation. I think it would be accurate to say when we assessed Birmingham in 2019, there was some issues certainly covering over the strength of the financial strategy wasn't strong. Accountability was particularly weak, and efficiency savings and the delivery of efficiency savings were a real challenge for the organisation. Notwithstanding effectively a structural deficit and growing service pressures, as well as legacy debt, which certainly is a common feature of many local authorities, we found the overall strength of financial resilience at Birmingham to be moderate, which was significantly better than what we saw in 2019. Could I have the next slide, please? In terms of financial management, financial management capability is significantly improved beyond what we thought would have been possible within 2 years. And indeed, turning some of the real weaker areas into a much stronger position. So much so that we believe in SITFA that the pace of change and the real grip on delivering improvement is highly commendable. There's a real commendable response to the issues that we first highlighted in 2018, 2019, and it was a real pleasure to come back to see the extent of real change, which we don't normally see, particularly in these challenging times. The average statement scoring within our model would now place Birmingham within the reach of the top quartile, just within the top quartile, which is a remarkable achievement from where it was 2 years ago. And the star rating has moved from 1 star to 3 star, which again is a real testament to the work that's been carried out and driven by finance professionals and the services too. Just to give you an example of where Birmingham was in April 2019, if I can go to the next slide. We've got a high-level matrix here, and the model has 30 statements, and we map these 30 statements of global good practice against 4 management dimensions: leadership, people, processes and stakeholders. And we also map it against financial management styles. Delivering accountability is the traditional stewardship style, which is should be very, very strong in terms of the overarching legislative framework for local government, and the guiding principles of HM Treasury and SITFA indeed. So the scores should be relatively strong in delivering accountability over the management dimensions. It gets a bit tougher when you move down towards supporting performance. So supporting performance, this is where the financial capability drives the achievement of organisational objectives. Then it becomes even tougher when we get to enabling transformation. So it goes south when we get to that point where it's the ability of the organisation to transform itself, to be agile, to change, to adapt quickly, and to improve on delivering objectives through new technology, process change, etc. And as you can see from the reds here, the people management dimension significantly the weakest of across the management dimensions that we saw at the time. The scoring is out of 4. So the scores were particularly low, and hence the overall 1-star rating. Obviously, delivering accountability was the strongest, which we expected, but obviously supporting people was a bit of a surprise to us. Supporting performance was a bit of a surprise, given the extent of drop between the stewardship, delivering accountability, and the ability of the organisation to support the services in delivering their objectives. Could I have the next slide, please? The May 2021 matrix, the complexion changes significantly here. We're now moving towards a consolidation in the middle ground and upper middle ground on scoring, average statement scoring. Real strengths in delivering accountability now, with certainly 2 in the green zone, and on leadership and on stakeholder management dimensions, very, very strong, with real capability of improving on all of that. But the biggest change in it all is within the people management dimension, a remarkable turnaround from the basic reds and the 1s before to 2.5, 2 and 2, with real prospects of improving that further. The solitary red in there is process change, and it's 2 statements around the ability of finance systems and processes to change the organisation. Again, even though it's red, we would be confident that that will change quickly as the organisation moves over to a new ERP. and that in itself, getting that up and running, will it's hoped to change the scores in those two statements, and it'll change that red accordingly. Could I have the next one, please? I'll go through this quite quickly here. This gives you a deeper dive into the statement scores. We're moving up on some of the key scores on delivering accountability and performance, particularly L5 here on the ability of the organisation to use its financial expertise in decision making. Some real change in that area, and that's a testament to the work of the driver Section 151 and Deputy Section 151 officer, in bringing in some real talented staff and engaging with the services in a very proactive way, and really getting a grip over decision making with better financial information. Could I have the next slide, please? Yeah, on the individual statement scores, you can see the huge change here that has happened over the 2 years, particularly in moving up the skill base in finance and managing the function more effectively, significantly more effectively, and creating a finance business partner environment that it is really moving in the right direction. If keeping the same pace of change, we would be confident that finance business partnering and the finance function itself will be a centre of excellence, given the pace of change. So certainly one of the biggest areas that weaknesses that we saw was accountability in the services for financial management performance. In the statement P5, that's changed significantly. Still some way to go, but it's improved markedly, and I think the organisation can have confidence, or better confidence, in the ability of budget holders, service managers, heads of service, in the accountability for financial performance. They're really owning it now. Could I have the next slide? Process change in delivering accountability. There's marginal improvement. Very difficult to move up on these. There was already some half-decent scoring in here, but I'd just like to make comment on budget setting is improved significantly, far more bottom-up and budget setting there. Treasury management is moving towards exemplar status, I would have to say. It really is amongst the highest scores we've seen. Actively managing budgets in year, there's real strong agility in there, and PR5 moving from 2.25 to a 3. Birmingham always had relatively robust assurance processes there. They are the same. They've moved on slightly, and on accounts, final accounts close down, it's in an excellent place in PR9. So very difficult to move forward. There's 9 statements in that area, but there has been a consistent improvement. Still some work to do in the transactional finance, but I'll maybe talk about that in a minute. Could I have the next slide, please? Yeah. Supporting performance and transformation and processes, again, quite difficult. The medium-term financial plan significantly improved. It's now one of the best medium-term financial strategies that we have seen. It's straightforward, it's detailed, and you get an honest appraisal of the financial landscape over the 4-year period from 2021 to 2024-5. Members should have confidence in it. It's certainly detailed. Some of the assumptions in there are well stress tested. Yes, there's a structural deficit that kicks in year 3, but we would be confident that the organisation would be a good place to deal with that well before then. So the score has gone up to 2.75. Forecasting is significantly improved as well in PR11. Again, members should have confidence in the information that's coming across their desks and laptops about the strength of in-year positioning and forecasting. Still issues in value for money on procurement, but there is a target operating model project that we would be confident we'd be dealing with them. And as I mentioned some minutes ago, when we get to the transformation statements and processes, PR 1415, that will change from the 2 and the 1.5 that's there, given the plans that are in train for a new ERP. Grab the final slide on the detail. Delivering accountability on stakeholders. This is all about confidence in the organisation and its ability to demonstrate fiscal discipline, and that's massively changed in 2 years, from a 2 to a 3. The sources that we get to look at on this is external audit. Speaking with external audit, they are in a far more comfortable place with the City Council. So much so that from a potential Section 114 position, that then, Birmingham is now regarded as in far better shape now, and certainly external auditors are looking elsewhere. So value for money, slight improvement there, but more to go, but heading in the right direction. Could I have the next slide, please? Yeah. 6 strengths here. Financial leadership, that has really driven the change. There's certainly been great work from the Section 151, the Deputy Section 151, and the members as well, in facilitating the environment to push on at pace, and that is to be commended, really. As I mentioned earlier, the financial strategy, the financial plan 2021-2025, detailed, really shaped and supporting the organisation's objectives. Sometimes we see organisations, local government organisations, that have a financial strategy, and it really is a kind of means to an end, in as much as it misses out the crucial bit, which is supporting objectives, the delivery of objectives. Well, certainly the financial plan that you have, the objectives is its core. I mentioned Indian monitoring forecasting, the ability to deal with left field shocks quickly. Certainly there, treasury management is certainly one of the best we've seen, and it really is great for us to come in and see that CIFA's own guidance is more than applied. Governance and risk is in good shape as well. There may well be more work to be done in that, but certainly solid, and there's a level of assurance that members should be satisfied with. And business partnering is certainly going towards advanced business partnering. Very difficult area to do well in. It needs a multiplicity of skills in helping decision makers in the services make the right decisions. Finance becoming an enabler rather than keeping score. And that's where we're at with Birmingham. It's now enabling decisions in the services in a more optimal way. Next slide, please. Areas for development, for further development. There's 5 here, and in priority order, they relate to accountability and competency, financial management competency framework. There's still some work to do in that, but there's been significant strides made within the 2 years. Letters of accountability that went out to budget holders has really focused minds and sharpened the realisation that service performance and financial performance should really be part of the one overall service performance. So whilst there's been good work here, we are confident that there'll still be more grip on accountability in the next year or so. Transactional finance, in terms of performance on the typical transactions of paying bills, generating income, etc. In terms of recovery, there's still work to be done in that. But we're confident as part of the target operating model for finance that will be significantly improved. Asset management is a difficult area for virtually all the organisations that we look at this precise point in time, and it's no different in Birmingham. The ability sweat assets, to basically minimise overhead on assets and maximise disposal costs. Very, very difficult area, particularly in what we see will be a difficult post-COVID environment. Finance team structuring is still on the way through the target operating model, and we were confident that that will produce the right balance of skills for the organisation. And finally, procurement. There is a target operating model project specifically for procurement, and that will optimise both capacity and good practice. Particularly in contract management, the front end of basic procurement is more than adequate. It's the finer aspects of in contract management, which is very, very difficult. Most organisations struggle with that. Could I have the next slide, please? The overall summary would be that there's been real strong progress from our original assessment. We would be very confident that at this pace of change that Birmingham will be regarded as a finance centre of excellence, given a whole range of factors, and that will help the organisation and certainly achieve its objectives in a more effective way. So it has been significantly transformed, the financial management capability. Resilience is now moderate. Many local authorities would love to be in that position. There's been a real benefit in managing not just reserves, but in terms of COVID finances, been very, very strict in how that's accounted for, with real precision in there. We don't normally see that at the organisations we've been looking at. In terms of the overall movement, the 3-star is highly commendable. And there's a range of things that really stand out for us in terms of the financial strategy, confidence on the in-year reliability and forecasting, and that has really not just strengthened the financial discipline throughout the organisation, but also helped imbue a confidence. It's a self-fulfilling circle in terms of self-fulfilling virtue in effect. So it's gathering its own momentum and pace. When we carried out our assessment, and it's in the report, that we, based on the pace of change and the strength of change, we had forecasted that keeping that momentum forward and effectively dealing with some of the development areas which we were confident would be dealt with appropriately, that the council would be able to achieve, or certainly within the grasp of achieving 4-star by September, October 2022. Could I have the next slide, please? This is a strat line that we would basically take as our overall assessment for Birmingham. It's moved beyond just sound and basic financial management capability towards highly effective financial management capability. And again, it is a real pleasure to see an organisation pick up on the areas that we've identified as needing strengthening and actually dealing with it appropriately. The final slide. Overall, we'd be confident that 4-star is achievable for Birmingham. There's not many local authorities in that bracket. Given what has happened, the pace of change, and if that's maintained, we would be confident that Birmingham will have transformed itself from a 1-star to a 4-star in a relatively short period of time, which is really quite remarkable. So happy to answer any questions on the presentation, ladies and gentlemen, but also happy to answer any questions on the report that is dated May 2021. Before I do that, I need to apologise to Councillor Chatfield. Within the appendices noted as the finance portfolio holder, so our apologies. We'll amend that to Cabinet Member of Finance and Resources accordingly. So Sorry about that, Councillor Chatfield.
Yeah, he's very touchy about his job title, Stuart.
Now, Carl, don't spread rumours. The fact that I hadn't noticed probably says how touchy I am about the job title, quite honestly. But no, thank you, Stuart, for that. I thought that was a really clear presentation. It was excellent. Thank you.
I don't know whether you or Becky want to add anything before I bring people in, Tristan.
Can I just make a couple of comments if I can? Because I think it's the next
yeah.
steps kind of thing I think that's probably important. I think one of the things we haven't really talked about is the importance of the ERP programme. The kind of several of the next steps and work on the improvement programme is kind of dependent on getting that system in place and up and operational properly. And obviously members will be aware, we've talked about it at this meeting, how complex and how much institutional effort is having to be put into making sure that system is up and running. So that's a big part for us, and I guess something the committee will want to keep an eye on going forward. In terms of those next steps, I think a couple of other things. One on the procurement, especially, I think there's a lot of focus on this, and I think it's worth just mentioning quickly about the return to sort of category management approach. So moving to a system where individual procurement officers hold a kind of have become experts in particular areas of council business. And I think that is a significant change for us organisationally, and that is being delivered at the moment. But I am confident with a new AD in place as well coming shortly, that service will really start to motor in terms of making the improvements we need around that, linking through into contract management. Because I think without the category management approach, it's difficult to get a proper grip on the contract management side as well, and to support service areas effectively around contract management. Just on the assets piece as well, I think there's a couple of things on that, and I'm sure Becky would love to talk at length around this. But one of them is the corporate landlord approach that we're trying to develop here, which is important for us to get that absolutely right. And I think that's something we need to look towards getting set up properly as an institution. We obviously hold a large number of assets around the city, which we use, and being corporate landlord to all of those and bringing that together in one function, I think, is really important. And that ties. And then the second part of the assets piece, I suppose, is what's in the delivery plan, which is about how we get best value from assets we hold. They're not our office buildings, assets we hold generally. We obviously own staggeringly large amounts of land around the city and buildings and all sorts of things, and how we get best value out of those rather than simply selling them out into the open market should we want to do that. So there's stages of development we can go through in order to get better yield from those assets, and whether that's just getting planning permission on the sites or clearing the sites or whatever it might be, each one of those steps adds value into that asset, and then it's about determining which stage we want to then dispose of that asset or keep it for ourselves. And there's some work going on around our property company around how we might want to do that. But all of those things and a more sophisticated approach to assets that we're hoping to develop as we go forward. But I think that's probably enough for me. Yeah, over the questions for myself, Stuart, or Becky as well.
Okay. Debbie, I'll bring you in first. Debbie Clancy.
I think I was last to put my hand up.
I'm chairing the meeting, Debbie. Thank you.
Okay, fine, fair dues, fair dues. Stuart, thank you for the presentation. It was, I'm not from a finance background, so it's very, very difficult as an elected member, if you're not in the finance world, to actually get a grasp of everything that's coming your way in a presentation. But you did that very well. So you've told me a lot. I'm sure there's a lot I don't know about. And I'm sure unless you're in that field and you're digging deep, or deep dive, as it seems to be the new quote, it's hard to grasp all of it. You did touch on some issues. Tristan has just come in and covered some of that, because I did put a big question mark around asset management, and I did put a big question mark around the procurement and contract management. Interesting that the cabinet members just mentioned about disposals or keeping of the sites or the assets, because it is a concern for me just to know what the council proposes to do in order to get greater yield, to keep the accounts and the health of the finance base that we've got, and what assets we've got around the city. I know he said there's some work being done around that, so you might not want to touch on that. I don't know, that's probably remains to be seen. And I know that overview and scrutiny were doing some work around land and assets that we've got. Without getting too technical, I just want to move over to something you said earlier. You said Birmingham is in a better place as far as fiscal discipline is concerned, and you mentioned, or you touched on, auditors. Now, I don't sit on audit committee, but I know that in the past we have challenged the council because I think it was about March 2019. I think I'm right there. We had Grant Thornton do an external audit review. Now, bearing in mind, Birmingham had 3 of those in 2 years, and compared nationally to other local authorities, that was quite a concern and a challenge from us politically to the group. So you might want to retouch on that. I just want to go back into the bulk of the report. I think it was page 27. It talked about 432 million total expenditure on capital projects. Now, I don't expect you to give me a detailed breakdown. Maybe one of the officers wants to touch on it. Investment in what? I suppose is my question. What is the 432 million the bulk of? And in the current climate we are with COVID, it seems like a lot of money in a lot of investment. So my question to a specific officer is, what is the return on that investment? Because it's a big number. I'm just going to check my notes if there's anything else. Okay. The leader, this is my last point, the leader at the last co-ordinating presented to this committee a very long list of all the new appointments for the JNC recruitment. Some remain to be filled, and we've obviously got a new chief executive now. I may have missed it in the report, and it doesn't drill down into the detail, but I'm always concerned about savings that are made, that we don't become a top-heavy organisation. And I remember working at a firm many, many years ago, and there seemed to be a very top-heavy organisation strategy, and lots of the lower level management was being cut out of the system for those savings. And you often find that. And I don't know if one of the officers wants to touch on that, because fine, have your JNC panel people, have the high level people, but is there a cost financially or repercussions to the low level staff within the organisation? Because what we don't want is too many chiefs and not enough soldiers moving forward. And I don't know if there's somebody who can answer that for me. Many thanks.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. That's why I brought you on first, because I wanted to get the difficult questions out of the way for the officers. Okay. I don't know, Stuart or Tristan or Becky, who's gonna deal with those?
Can I start with the external audit position Councillor Clancy raised? We had discussions with Grant Thornton, with John Roberts' partner, Grant Thornton, and the organisation is certainly in such a different place from where it was when the same organisation, Grant Thornton, the external auditor, was thinking about a statutory notice in terms of formal warning. Auditors are certainly considering that, and a whole range of authorities at the moment that are in a much different place from where Birmingham is today. The improvements in all ways, financial management capability, have provided a very different level of assurance and confidence in the external auditor's judgments, notwithstanding the accuracy of the final accounts, the robustness of the financial position, but also the overall assurance within the organisation and most aspects of value for money. So it's basically the virtuous circle here in 2 years, and the external auditor would be failing in their statutory duty and in best practice external audit process to basically not flag up anything that there's a concern. So if things have changed and there's a high level or a better level of confidence there, so that all the issues that you quite properly remember from 2019 and all the challenges from external audit are in a different place. I hope that answers that.
Tristan or Becky, do you want to come back on the other points? Hello, Becky.
Hi, hello. Sorry, trouble with a laptop that doesn't want to unmute. Oh yeah, what shall I make a start? I mean, one of my first answers is actually a suggestion. I think it's really important that Coordinating and Overview Scrutiny Committee get a full picture of the capital programme and the major projects within and the outcomes, the intended outcomes of that programme. So rather than me reel off a couple of the major projects that make up the 432 million, I would really welcome the opportunity to be able to share with this committee, this is where the money's going, these are the intended outcomes for the city, if the chair's okay with that. I can cover off a lot of the other questions if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, no problem.
So if I just start with asset management, in terms of what's happening on asset management generally, and I can pick up corporate landlord as part of that, we've got the delivery plan that went to Cabinet back in November 2020. And we've got full delivery plan programme management around that. One of the major work streams in that is inclusive growth and within that assets. And there's a couple of dimensions to that. Some of it is, you're absolutely right, Councillor Clancy, is around asset disposals in this year, because there is £40 million worth of capital transformation that's being funded from capital receipts, and that's a government directive that you can use capital receipts if you're funding capital transformation. However, it has to be absolutely clear that it's within the definition of that. So finance are holding the ring on that to ensure that we are only capitalising transformation where it is transformation that's leading to revenue savings. So there is a £65 million capital disposal programme that was approved by February Cabinet by the Budget Council. OK, that is all going through a governance programme that sits within the delivery plan. Now, that all of those are being worked up. That disposal programme is being worked up into an enhanced business case that's coming forward to Cabinet. And that will come forward to Cabinet in September of this year. So you'll see that coming forward, and you'll see all of the detail behind that. OK. Broader than that, there's a whole work stream within the inclusive growth delivery plan programme, which is around development sites, where the city's going, how we're going to, revitalise the city, because obviously we've been through a significant pandemic. So again, any outputs from that, it will obviously be significant financially, will be coming through to Cabinet as well, because it sets policy and it has significant financial implications. So that's an enhanced business case again. I think it's getting this structure and governance around the production of outline business cases, enhanced business cases, finance fully involved in all of those work streams at a very high level. And that coming formally through the scrutiny process and the Cabinet process gives that openness and transparency that something of this significance requires. So hopefully that helps you with what's happening on it. There's nothing to say that shouldn't come through for pre-scrutiny before it comes to Cabinet. Obviously, I'd need to liaise with the leader. This is his portfolio, and he'll have views on that. Corporate landlord was mentioned. So if we've just covered off the outward facing development sites for the regeneration of the city, then we've got our own operational assets that we use as an organisation. So be that libraries, be that offices, be anything, community centres, anything that we use as an asset in order to deliver our services is classed as an operational asset. Sorry for the technical term, but that's just differentiates itself from regeneration assets or housing assets. Now the idea there is to, and that's going to come under the work stream that I'm the senior responsibility officer for, Fit for Future Council, which is another work stream in that delivery plan. So it's all in there, have a look. Now the corporate landlord is essentially giving one single point of leadership across and management across all operational assets. At the moment, operational assets sit within individual services. Nobody's got oversight of it, and that's not good enough for Birmingham. We're pulling it all together, so it's all absolutely managed. So in effect, you've got a landlord function. You've got one single leadership and management unit that manage all of the operational assets for the authority. Now they will have a sense then of what do services need. Services then become tenants of that landlord function. Okay, so that then gives us that whole oversight, and that's really important for the city as well, because it's important for communities, what assets sit in what communities. It brings in the ward dimension to it as well, and the community dimension, as well as obviously, you know, efficiency of managing that massive asset portfolio. That is just starting. So just so you know, that is not in any way in implementation yet. That's in, right, we need to get on with this, we need to do it. So that will also be coming forward where there's any policy or financial implications that will be coming forward through the scrutiny to cabinet as well. So just so you know, that's happening, and that's my responsibility. The other area that I wanted to speak a bit more about, if that's okay, is around procurement and contract management, because I know this has been an issue for the authority for a while now. So what we're doing it through ONS resources as well, and we have a number of informal meetings that are just dedicated to this. It's of such significance to the authority. Given that we spend with third parties in excess of £400 million a year, this needs oversight. So again, this is something that we're pulling together, but starting with commissioning. So each service commissions, they set what they want procurement service to go to market with. So what we've done is we're working with Adult Social Care, who are one of the biggest commissioners first, and so procurement and commissioning are working together on this. We're looking at how we set up commissioning to be the very best for Birmingham. So we've put in place a process with gateways in it, gateways that allow member input at the earliest stage of commissioning, so that we've got members' priorities coming in there. So the relevant cabinet member and broader, you know, should it be needed, set out what the commissioning requirements are. What do we want for the citizens of our city? So these are the commissioning requirements. They go through several gateway processes before they go into procurement. Once it's been through procurement and contracts are awarded, then it becomes a contract management issue. Now, all three of those areas are being worked on together, and all three need significant improvement. And that's where we're going with it. So we're doing a pilot with all of that through Adult Social Care, and they do public health as well, because they're one of the biggest commissioners. Once we've got that process working absolutely what's needed for the city, we're then rolling that out across the other directorates. So it's not just about, I know we use the terminology of procurement, but if we get commissioning right, the rest should be relatively straightforward. Contract management is quite a different issue. Like I say, commissioning and procurement, that's doable. Contract management is another issue. So we have a number of senior managers and middle managers here who manage contracts. That needs to be seen as a technical skill in its own right, rather than just an add-on to the job. Okay, so that's where we're going with all of that training, that awareness. This is how we manage contracts, because otherwise we can't guarantee that everything we've commissioned and procured is actually going to deliver. And that's also really important, I know, for members from a social value perspective, because, as you know, Birmingham's gone big on social value for a number of years now. In fact, it was looked on as a centre of excellence, I know, about 8 years ago when Birmingham led on this. Because I was working elsewhere and we were all popping down to Birmingham to see how well they were doing it, and it was definitely a centre of excellence. It's about managing that through to delivery through contract management. So there's a whole work stream there being worked on. As Councillor Chatfield mentioned, J&C have approved an assistant director role in its own right on procurement, which is where Birmingham was a number of years ago. It absolutely needs that senior leadership. But it also has programme management around it for the delivery of the target operating model in procurement. So procurement's on its way up. We want it to be best in class, exactly like, top quartile like finances. So that's well on its way to delivery. The commissioning gateway process and the work we're doing with commissioning will be rolled out across the whole organisation, and we will be doing technical training as goes contract management to make sure that contract managers actually understand what they're being asked to do. So that was where I was going to leave it. I hope I've helped.
Okay. Are you happy with that, Debbie?
I am.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll bring in Mohammed now. Mohammed Akhlaq. Mohammed, I just want to, before you come in, I am
Thanks, Chair. A couple of
Mohammed,
hello.
I just wanted to say that I'm conscious that you're chair of the Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I want to thank you for allowing us to have this presentation today, because I know it's your committee's you're leading on this. So I just wanted to say that before you started.
Okay, thanks, Chair. A couple of points I wanted to raise. They've already been answered by Becky and Tristan on ERP and procurement, but there's a couple of issues. A couple of questions for Stuart. The finance team structuring you've got on there, is there gaps, or are we talking about restructuring, moving people around? The key to all the finances is a team that play the role of finance, and we've come a long way. I mean, to achieve 3 stars since, I mean, there's a lot of good work that's actually gone in, but our aim for next September is to get 4-star. I know the Tristan's mentioned COVID as one of the roadblocks, maybe. What other roadblocks could there be, and what are the plans for? Because if you look at some of the slides, we haven't moved forward. So what are the plans to actually put more focus on them issues that can move us towards that 4-star? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Stuart.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes. Certainly on finance structure, this is an emerging and evolving position, because there is a very effective target operating model for finance in train. We would be confident that an optimal structure will be created from that. It's a case of the organisation creating the right skills in specific areas. That's been substantially achieved, but in terms of a permanent way forward, the TROM project is certainly enabling that. So it's still a project that's underway. The Section 151 and the Deputy Section 151 had the foresight to bring in the very best available staff with specific technical skills. They've hit the ground running over the last 2 years. The job now is to embed those skill sets within the permanent finance structure, and the target operating model is doing that. So that's basically a work in progress, but it's starting off from a very good base. In terms of the getting to the 4-star, the report identifies the development areas. Becky had touched on the procurement side and the asset management side. There was certainly 5. The other improvements are really along with the finance structure that I talked about are embryonic. They will develop and be dealt with in the normal course of events, given the plans that are in place within the target operating model project. The strengthening of accountability at the services will effectively, we think, develop naturally now. because of the measures that are in place and the rigour that's there on not just budget setting and financial strategy, which really means the creation of good service plans out there in the services, aided by advanced finance business partnering, but in year capability, so that budget holders are effectively using their budget wisely, knowing that if they don't need it, that it gets returned, or if basically their plans for spend or achievement of income are not going to happen, very quickly reporting that and having a very close relationship with finance business partnering. So effectively the accountability side of financial performance will happen. Transactional finance, there's plans within the TOM to move that forward and progress. That asset management, team structuring and procurement have been dealt with. So in terms of the direction of travel, the trajectory of it all, that will effectively allow the achievement of 4-star. So this natural development of what's in train at the moment will do that. But obviously, you can't take that for granted. You can't be complacent, and obviously there needs to be the same level of pace and grip in all of it to achieve 4-star. We'd be confident, and our caveat is as long as the same pace, the resources that have been made available are continued, and the support that the members give is continued, then we don't think that the achievement of 4-star is certainly beyond Birmingham. And these development areas, in terms of priority order, will be substantially addressed, and that will enable 4-star. The strengths that are there are not strengths that are easily going to loosen or go back the way. When you put in strong financial leadership, it tends to move itself forward as a momentum and an impetus all of its own. So we would be confident that there will be movement in the development areas. Some of them are incremental. The best organisations we've come across and globally they've had some moderate scores and incrementally changed and improvement. So no, it's not all about getting greens and threes out of 4. It's about making solid progress and a consistent progress across the whole range. There's 30 statements in the model, and they cover a full spectrum of financial management, from budget setting, overall financial strategy, and you've got all aspects of risk, governance, final accounts, close down, transactional finance, procurements in there. So there's a whole gamut, and the people side of capability, the financial competencies needed within the services, not just in the core finance function. So no, we're delighted to see the approach taken by Birmingham and the way that we feel that these development areas are going to be tackled. It's a very difficult operating environment at the moment. The service pressures will undoubtedly change post-COVID, but Birmingham is a good place to deal with that, and as well as dealing these development areas.
Tristan, you wanted to come in, I think.
Yeah, just a couple of things, if I can, just around the finance service itself. Although I think it is worth noting that I think the report relates to the whole organisation, which is why I think it's important it comes to this committee as well as to the resources committee, because it is ultimately about ownership, and we need everyone and every part of the organisation to be on board. But just in terms of the finance service, there is some work. Stuart's already mentioned the staffing and how much progress there's been in terms of staffing, but we are keen to move to a more position of more permanency. Members will be aware there's quite a significant number of interims in the organisation. We want to move on to a more permanent, stable staff footing, obviously for the long-term benefit of the organisation, and we are doing that, and that process is already underway. Although recruitment, I think, in some of these technical specialist areas isn't easy, and it's not just finance. I think we're seeing the same in areas like planning, etc., where there is a shortage of the sort of qualified people that we're looking for as an organisation. So, but that's across the board in local government. It's not just Birmingham that has that challenge. But we're also doing, as kind of a counterweight to that, is to try and do more things around local recruitment. So bringing in young, we've got fantastic, obviously, universities in our city, but also even pre-university college leavers who are keen to get into the sort of world of work, and we can offer them a way in and train them up in what I hope is sort of, you know, a decent career for them. And I think that's a good role for the city, not just in terms of our needs as a council, in terms of bringing good talented staff into the organisation and training them up, but also in terms of our broader sort of social impact in the city. And I think that's something we aspire towards. We're already doing some campaigns around that, and that's something I hope will develop over the next year or so, particularly led by our deputy Section 151 officer, who's done great work on this in this area.
Okay, thank you. Liz Clements.
Thanks very much, Carl, and yeah, thanks very much, Stuart, for that presentation. I thought it was, you know, very clear and very good. It's easy to follow it as a non-financial specialist. I mean, I think this is absolutely extraordinary, and I'd like to thank all the officers that are involved in this improvement process, because Rob Pocock has put a comment to the same effect in the chat, but I and Rob and the other scrutiny chairs at the time were briefed on the initial report, and I have to say that it was the most uncomfortable and alarming meeting that I've attended in my time as a councillor in this authority. I joined in 2017. I had previously been an officer, and I think, you know, that it was really important that the council took the findings of the initial report very seriously, because they were grave. So I think, you know, that the distance that's been travelled so far is remarkable. You know, I'm someone who spent some time in the authority working on performance improvement, so I know it's not easy, and you know, it involves whole system change, but I do think we should really acknowledge the extent of the change, you know, and the way that this whole, you know, improvement agenda has been gripped in an open and progressive way, that the response was not defensive or arrogant, you know. So I think that shows actually that the culture of the whole council is changing, and I really welcome that, because again, one of the experiences as a councillor, you know, in the budget making process is turning up to meetings relatively, you know, late in the process, you know, sitting in front of spreadsheets and looking at all sorts of assumptions that have been made in previous years about, you know, in this environment, about savings, and realizing that they were either totally unrealistic at the beginning or hadn't been delivered in year, and not enough action had been taken. And what I've understood from the presentation and the report that Stuart has presented to us this morning is that we're not going to be in that position in the future. And I think if we think about the pressures on us in future coming out of COVID, and in all sorts of environments like, you know, the preparation for the Commonwealth Games, where we have significant financial challenges and risks which have been pointed out to us by auditors, it's really important that we have these systems in place. I've noted from the discussion, you know, in the comments from Stuart and from Becky, you know, the need, you know, to ensure that we've got, you know, the right skills in our service managers as well as in finance. And then Becky made the comment about the need to ensure that that contract management is seen as a specific skill, and that we bring in skilled individuals there. But I am very much, you know, concerned about, you know, the profile of the Birmingham manager, particularly in services. You know, your progression through management should include having these core financial skills. So you should be able to do forecasting. You should be able to see when your services overspending, and look at how you work, you know, to bring the expenditure back onto profile. So it's really maybe more of a question for Becky about what, you know, what's the work that's going on within organisational development in the council to look at, you know, the core set of financial skills that every manager needs. But the main point I wanted to make is that I'm absolutely delighted, you know, at the rate of progress, and I really hope that we can maintain the progress, you know, and get to the 5 stars. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Becky, you wanted to come back.
Yes, I do, because there's a huge amount of work going on in finance as a service, and part of the success is what Sarah Pitt's done as deputy Section 151, with pulling in specific OD support to drive the cultural change in the service itself, to be able to give the right approach to leadership to the rest of the organisation, because this is a whole organisation score as well, you know, especially in terms of accountability and everything, and financial management, as well as within finance service itself. In terms of the overall organisational development, as you know, Deborah's joined us, Deborah Cadman as chief exec. and has already embarked on an overall leadership programme. I know because I was there last week, in terms of what the culture needs to be in the organisation going forward, and therefore what the top team, in officer terms, obviously only, needs to, where they need to be, their leadership approach and everything else, and developing that really strong team, of officers at the top, because that's absolutely vital and not something that I've seen in the organisation over the last couple of years that I've been here. So that's really welcomed, because any culture change does need to be led from the top, and then embedded absolutely solidly across the whole organisation. So in the past, we have had organisational development and cultural change, but it's been done through a series of levers and approaches rather than setting it at the top and really living it through the whole organisation. So I hope that helps. That's where we're going with that cultural change. And it's a very, very welcome. It's very welcome, I think, within the organisation. So I'm hoping that helps, Councillor Clements.
Okay, Liz, do you want to come back?
Just briefly, yes, that's very helpful, Becky, and congratulations to Sarah on what she's doing. And you're right, there've been numerous cultural change programmes and competence programmes and this, that, and the other in the past. But clearly, if we ended up with a report that we had in 2018 and some of them weren't sustainable in terms of the change that they delivered in financial management skills, and Tristan and has mentioned the bringing in of the new ERP program, and is that going to result in financial information that is actually easy for service managers to interpret and use to inform their decision making? Because I spent some time in adult social care. It's a very pressured environment, and managers need information that they can understand and act upon. And I think that's because a lot of the financial information that I used to see, particularly when I joined the organisation 20 years ago, was just so opaque, really, to the non-specialist. I think it actually did militate against any sort of sensible financial planning. So I hope that that's a feature of that new system being brought in.
Chair, is it okay if I respond to that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So the ERP system that we've chosen is the Oracle system. Now, the significance of sharing that is that the whole basis for the Oracle system, unlike the SAP system, is all about user experience. It's all about dashboards, easily interpreted financial information, as well as linking it through to performance information, because we've brought an additional module that will help us with that, an analytics type module. So sorry to get into technical speak, but the significance is that it will make it significantly easier for budget managers and senior managers to understand the financial information they're being given. And that's a shift from the SAP system. And the only reason for sharing this is that the SAP system is a system that's loved by technical accountants, okay? But making any sense of financial data if you're a non-financial senior manager is virtually impossible, even if it's implemented to its full extent, which it hasn't been here at Birmingham in the past. So senior managers will get those dashboards. We will be working, and we're already working in, because we go live on the 1st of April, and I'm the senior responsibility officer on this programme, so hence I can talk about it, is that we've already started that learning and development, so that when we go live on the 1st of April, managers will be able to interpret, they'll be able to use the system, they'll be able to interpret the data from it. Now, there is also, within the delivery plan that I mentioned previously, there is a whole data and insight work stream. It's absolutely vital that we do this, because there's an awful lot of data held in an awful lot of different systems that, if brought together in a useful way, could give us real intelligence and insight across the organisation, as well as with our partners. So that's embryonic. I'm not making any promises that we're anywhere with it. It's embryonic. It's a very, very difficult thing to achieve in any organisation, let alone one the scale of Birmingham. So that's another active work stream that goes way beyond finances, but is really vital so that members have full sight of those pieces of information that really matter.
Okay, if I can just finish by echoing what a lot of members have said, which is that Yeah, I remember the presentation we had in the scrutiny office, all the chairs together, and I think all our jaws collectively dropped when we saw the catalogue. And it wasn't just one or two issues; it was a whole host of failings. I think is the key word over decades. It wasn't just a recent phenomenon. It was going back 10, 15 years. It was devastating as an elected member to think that we could have got into that state. And I suppose this is a question for Stuart and Becky and to some extent Tristan. Presumably someone did an analysis of how we got to that terrible state of affairs and looked at the cumulative effect, I suppose, and trying to explain why we did it and put measures in place that would prevent that from happening in the future, because it's a gradual drift, isn't it? It doesn't just happen overnight. It's a gradual drift that leads us to that state of affairs. So I suppose what I'm asking for is reassurance that those lessons have been learned and measures have been put in place to prevent that drift of failure to adhere to key financial regulations and principles over time. And I suppose linked to that is one of my bugbears or pet hates is poor performance management of staff in not just this authority but all public sector organisations. We seem to appoint people and then think, oh, you've got the job, go away and do what you want. There's no ongoing performance management or support to make sure that they do their job to the standard that's expected. And I suppose what I'm saying is that a good accountant doesn't necessarily make a good financial manager. And I want reassurance that we're not just appointing the best accountants to managerial positions. We do look at key management skills, both in terms of budgets and personnel. So I don't know who wants to start off with that.
If I can, I mean that's one hell of a question, if you don't mind me saying so, Carl. I think just to put it into two bits, I suppose. On the first bit, I think my memory of the organisation doesn't go perhaps back as far as yours does, Chair. But I think there was a degree of complacency. I think it's probably safe to say around the organisation. So having been we make a big thing of being the biggest local authority. I mean, generally accepted that we were kind of we were a trailblazer and were ahead of the game back in the day. But I think that unfortunately, like any organisation, if you sit in a static position, the rest of the world moves on, and I think that's largely what happened here. And I think there was, and also obviously as well, we have suffered from, we don't want to go on about a decade of austerity when perhaps decisions around the back office are particularly easier to make than those that affect frontline services. So I think there's always a temptation not to invest and to strip back resource in the back office. And then, but ultimately, the position we found ourselves in 2019 probably reflects the fact that if you keep taking resource out and if you don't invest in and keep up to speed, the ERP system being a good example where we're operating on a system that probably we should have got rid of 5 years ago. That lack of investment has consequences ultimately that will feed into service delivery, and I think that touches on some of the points Liz was making as well about how you invest in the organisation as a whole. On the staffing side around performance management, there is a lot ongoing in HR as well at the moment, and without taking this session off into a completely different route, perhaps it might be worth this committee taking a view of the future operating model in HR and the work that's being undertaken there, which again is happening at speed. It is ambitious in terms of where we want to get to. And the last point I think I'll just make around the you made, Councillor, is just around how we make sure we don't slip back into complacency and not progressing service. And I think part of that is obviously about leadership and having the right leadership in place. And I can't, and as I've said it before, I can't really praise our Section 151 officer and deputy enough over the progress we've made over the last couple of years. It really has been phenomenal. But also, I think What we've also got to be mindful of is the need for external validation, I think, and that's part of the role SIPFA can play, and having that support. And we can all make our own judgments about the service, and you'll do your own internal assessment of the position, and it's important we do that regularly. But I also think it's important to get external validation, and I think the role SIPFA play in doing that for the sector is really important, and something we'll sort of look to build on. And the last point, I think, if I can, just coming back on something Liz said around the future, I think we do have to be aware we're still in choppy waters, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. The position we have, COVID is an effect. We still, the MTFP includes gaps in future years, still have to be met. And obviously there's a lot of plans in place through delivery plan, etc. But those gaps remain significant, and there is still work to be done around those. So I don't want to give the impression that suddenly, because our financial management has improved so significantly, it doesn't mean that the financial challenges have disappeared. What the improved position in terms of financial management allows us to do is to handle those shocks better and be prepared for them and put in place the measures that need to be put in place. But it doesn't mean that those shocks don't exist and that choppy water isn't still out there. And with that, I think that's probably all I'd like to say, other than I said thank you again to Stuart for the really clear and helpful presentation, I thought, Chair. Okay,
thank you. I think unless Becky or Stuart want to come back, I think we're done. Just on the point about performance management, I'm conscious as chair of coordinating overview and scrutiny. I do not want to incur the wrath of my fellow chairs by moving over into areas of their responsibility. So I'm happy to be kept up to speed privately on performance management, because it is a particular interest of mine. But I'm happy for HR to stay with Councillor Mohammed Aglak's committee and to take the lead on that. But it is such a critical issue for us, making the right appointments and making people are monitored and supported in their roles effectively. Okay, so thank you, Tristan, thank you, Becky, and thank you, Stuart, for an excellent thought-provoking presentation. And I think you've reassured members of the committee that the recent improvements aren't a flash in the pan and that they will continue moving forward. And I think the point that Tristan made is the continuing involvement of SIPFA to ensure we have that external validation is what will give us that additional reassurance moving forward. So thank you all very much indeed. We will now move on to item 5, which is review of Birmingham Business Charter for Social Responsibility. We've got Tristan on this one again, and he's going to be accompanied by Rokneddin Shariat. I hope I pronounced that right, Rokneddin. So over to you, Tristan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so sorry, me again. So this is the review of the charter. I mean, members, we think we've talked about this. I've certainly talked about this enough times. Members will know how significant and sort of highly valued the charter is, and I think we were and absolutely should be trailblazers in this area. We are the biggest local authority, huge spend, and therefore it's right that we try and get as much social value as we possibly can from those contracts that we have, and also encourage others. So there's a lot of talk about anchor institutions, so other big organisations in the city, and we work with them and try and help them deliver social value as well, which helps all our citizens. So the purpose of this paper really is just to kind of go through some of the kind of as the report develops, and this is really just early opportunity for members to kind of have some input on those. And you'll notice from the report that we've kind of grouped them into 3 kind of areas of things we're hoping to focus on. Some of them are more straightforward than others. So, for example, updating the ward rankings to the new indices of multiple deprivation, I don't think will be particularly controversial. And there's various other technical things. There's a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning, just because I think they'll be of interest to members. One of them is the inclusion of us signing up to the council's declaration for fair tax. So I think there was some publicity about a couple of weeks ago during Fair Tax Week, which I think is a really welcome step forward for us in terms of supporting an agenda that I think is of public concern, but also just quite frankly, it's the morally right thing to do. We would encourage the companies we do business with to pay fair tax, and we've had we've had a consideration of that in our procurement processes for a long time. But what the fair tax mark is about is saying that that there is a sort of standard. So it's not just a vague commitment. There is actually a standard we would expect. Well, we would hope our companies would work towards. We can't legally enforce it. We don't have the powers to do it. But what we can do certainly is encourage and praise those companies like Timpson's, for example, who have signed up to the fair tax mark. And I think all credit to those companies. And there's a list on the website if people are interested in those companies, and more signing up all the time. There's also the inclusion of the Steel Charter, which is an attempt by trade unions and the industry to encourage the use of UK steel, which I think doesn't directly affect us. We're not a big steel manufacturing town, other than we do have some processing works. There's more of it in the Black Country, but also, again, I think it's the right thing to do in terms of encouraging the use of UK steel. It's high environmental in a very carbon intense industry. UK standards are high around that. But also it's good for obviously UK jobs and promoting UK industry, which I think we all would welcome here as a group. Like I said, there's a whole load of things. I won't go through every item in the report. There's also things like replacing the 10 and 30 mile radiuses we currently use for something that's more local in terms of Birmingham and West Midlands specific, the combined authority borders as well. And lastly, I will touch on a few things in Group 3, which is kind of the long-term aspirational things. But I think things we really do need to look at, and I'm keen to look at, and we'll be having working groups and things like this over the next few months to try and get some focus on these and try and sort of, again, be trailblazers in terms of what we're doing as a local authority. So one of those is around the role of planning and social value in planning, which again is a developing area, and some other local authorities have done some work on it. Obviously, a lot of the focus around social value is on procurement, but obviously a lot of what happens in our city is determined through the planning process and isn't us directly procuring developments. It is large organisations, large developers coming in and building significant things in the city. And I think it's right that planning has a view on social value and tries to get a greater share of social value into the city from those large scale developments, so we can all benefit. And also that ties in nicely to sort of property sales as well. And then I think there's also just generally that piece of work around ensuring that there is a cycle, that what happens is and something I'm personally very keen on is we have a reporting cycle. So we know at the moment that most members' awareness of social value is probably only driven by what they see in cabinet reports. So what we're keen to do is to establish a cycle of reporting. So we say we're going to do something, we deliver it, and then we report back and say what worked and what didn't work, and then that informs where we want to go with the next major project or the next large procurement we have in the city. And so that's something I think we're keen to establish. We brought a report to Cabinet in April that went through a sort of high-level summary of some of the outputs, and I hope that will develop and become more sophisticated as we move forward. And on an annual basis, that reporting is something, again, that Birmingham can kind of lead the way on, and saying, look, this is what your local authority can deliver, this is what we can do. And I think we've got a really proud record that we can stand up and say, look, we deliver a huge amount of social value into our city. We should be proud of that. And make more of it, quite frankly. I think it's an achievement we should all be proud of as a city. And so and that hopefully would encourage others as well, so that other local authorities in the region and in the country, but also businesses and other anchor institutions will look at that and say, look, this is what Birmingham City Council are delivering. You know, we need to up our game and we need to report on it more. And then hopefully that allows us to pull together a picture of all the social value that's being delivered across the West Midlands, because there is government are keen on this agenda, companies are keen on this agenda. There's no reason why we can't push on and develop more. So and I'll bring Shariat in, who'll be able to give some more detail around this, but it is an exciting piece of work, and I'm really keen to hear your input. The paper's been circulated, so any of those points, you feed your input in now. The report is in a draft form, so this is genuinely open. Put it all together, and then when we go to Cabinet with this report, hopefully we can say it reflects the views of the whole of the authority as well, and cross-party as well. Shariat, I don't know if there's any items you want to pick up, and then we can open to questions then and see what.
Shariat,
yes,
is your name Shariat or Rocknadin, or is it both? How should we describe you?
You can call me Shariat. Shariat is my second name, but that is how I go. So, okay. if I may just add a few bits of more of the development that we are doing in terms of social value. A route to zero measure we would like to include in our green and sustainable theme, because carbon reduction is great and we have many of those measures, but we want to include a specific measure on the organization's stance on carbon neutral and by what year they intend to become carbon neutral. We want to establish a minimum of 20% weighting for all procurement and commissioning. And also to say that reporting is really important to us. It's great. We build in social value really well into procurement and commissioning, but what actually happens during the delivery is what's important. And this is another promise of the new ERP. We have built in the process of social value reporting into the new ERP so that it is taken care of as part of the standard contract management. Another bit of, I think, important development that we are doing is matching the needs of the council with the leverage to bring in social value. So if I say that the leverage is mostly in inclusive growth, i.e. road building and developments, but the need is in the Children's Trust and social care. So how do we connect the two together better? There are some really good examples already, but how do we do it more systematically? And also to let you know that as of Monday, we have launched a portal where community organizations go and post their project that they need support and help with in terms of time, resources, and possibly money, and businesses can go and fulfill that that need. So those are the things that you'll hear more about, but today specifically about the policy update.
Okay, thank you. I've got 3 members with their hands up. First one, Roger Harmer.
Thank you, Carl, and I very much welcome this report. I think this, as has been said, is a very important initiative that has been, is well mature within the council now. When I read the report, I was quite concerned that basically it just covered a number of things we could do without any review of what's working and where the glitches are in it, because sometimes you can put something in policies like this and everyone seems to, everyone agrees that this should be the right thing to do, but then for some reason it just doesn't work and there's another way to get it done. So not having any review of what's working, what's going well, and what's seemed to be a major omission. But the comments that Tristan made were encouraging in that will be done as part of this. So I very much hope that is the case. I was concerned in the group 2 to see the paragraph on the route to zero. I mean, we are now 2 years after passing the declaration of a climate emergency, and it's talking about proposing to introduce a new measure or new measures to align with the council's route to zero. Now, I appreciate that the strategy itself took a while to develop and so on, but it just seems to be that there's a bit of a lack of urgency in this one, and it is really important that we both get measures in there, and that there's a decent amount of debate amongst those that understand this and we're keen to ensure this agenda is central to everything we do as a council. So I would want to I'd be particularly interested in taking part in debate on those particular proposed measures, and keen that happens as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Tristan, do you want to come back or?
Yeah, okay, if I can, just very quickly, and then I'll be shouting. Just on that, I think it's important to make the distinction between, I suppose, the route to zero objectives of the thing itself we are purchasing, or the service we are procuring, and the social value element that we might then seek to do around also helping the route to zero. So it's kind of, there's two aspects in any one project. I mean, it's kind of important to sort of emphasize that. But yeah, I think what might work, I'll just put it out, as we develop those measures, perhaps it might be worth bringing back the specifics of those, either to this committee or perhaps to Liz's committee. I think would be the relevant one, to have a more detailed discussion about those. I'll be more than happy to do that.
Okay, Shariat, do you want to come back?
Just on the route to zero point, it is so when we contract, our relationship with that contractor is around the contract and not around the company as a whole. So we can say we want to have this stadium built. We want the stadium to be carbon neutral. That is not always as companies don't always focus on their contracts, they focus on their company. So they will say by year X, we will be, as a company, and very often global companies, we will be carbon neutral. So the difficulties in the conversation around the contract versus the company. So absolutely, we will bring it to the next one, propose it to cabinet, but we need to be cognizant of the difficulty for an organization to make their contract carbon neutral. And in terms of what works and what doesn't work, as Councillor Chatfield said, we'll bring it to the appropriate committee.
Okay, Deirdre Alden.
Thank you. I wanted to just ask about the piece on page 62, where it says, consider including social value in the planning process. And it says that councils such as Coventry and Islington are leading the way on this. And I wondered if we could hear more about that, please.
Yeah, either Shariat or Tristan.
I think Shariat might have more details than I do on the specifics of those two examples. So this is very early in the sense of just started to pull together a working group to have a conversation about this. So I quite honestly, Deirdre, I probably know as much as you do, other than that it's a developing area, and I know that, and there is some merit and there is some national interest around it.
Again, I think there is a little more I can add to this, but it is there is an estimate in terms of how much social value can be generated through planning versus procurement, and some of the proponents of this say that it is almost as much. But the question is how enforceable is it? And in terms of that, we need to get some advice from legal. We can put it in the planning condition or in the section 106, but how enforceable is it? But the industry as a whole is coming round to it, and they're becoming more and more mature. So it is, it is the right thing for us to do at this time.
Okay. There you are, Deirdre. You know as much as the senior officer and the cabinet member, it seems.
Does anyone know what Coventry and Islington are doing then? Because it says that here. It says they're leading.
They are just exploring, just like everyone else. I think they are exploring, and there have been some pilots where it has been included into the into the planning conditions. The question is then, beyond planning, does this then carry on to the occupier? So if they are building a office block and there are planning conditions in there, do the obligations carry on to the occupants of those office blocks, and will they have to deliver these social value outcomes? And that very often makes developers very nervous, because it sort of, but some developers are quite advanced, and in some places, not always. So if it's office space, they might be more comfortable in incorporating social value clauses in the lease agreement. But if it is warehousing, they may be less willing to incorporate those. And this is about conditions of employment, etc. But yeah, this is really leading edge activity in terms of social value.
Yep. It's what we've always thought, Deirdre. You know as much as everybody else.
In this case, is nothing.
Liz Clements.
Thanks, Chair. And for heaven's sake, Deirdre, don't run yourself down. You are the beacon of expertise and knowledge over over your whole long career in the council. So please, do not, so that you don't know things. I wanted to just come back to the discussion about the route to zero and the contribution that this charter can make. And I was absolutely delighted in what Shariat said to the meeting. I thought that the determination you showed in your comments was great, because I had the same concern as Roger when I actually read the paper about what I feel is slightly weak, or slightly something that appears slightly timid in terms of what we're committing to there. Because I'm saying this because I just remember all of the tortuous discussions at the time of the report that went to council on the implementation plan for Route to Zero and whether or not procurement and housing would be included. And we know from the research that the council has commissioned itself from Anthesis that procurement is the biggest generator of carbon emissions by the city council directly, sort of 80% or thereabouts. So that's emissions that we directly control, and we could do something about reducing them through the way that we commission and procure. And we're picking up some of the themes of the previous item that we discussed this morning. So I would expect, yes, to have a discussion in my Sustainability and Transport Committee about this. But I think if we're serious about this charter, we both want to be contracting with organisations that have made an organisational commitment to reducing carbon, and then we want them to sign up to a commitment to each individual contract. And when we're negotiating, we should be starting off from the commitments that we've made both in the initial declaration and in the action plan, to use our power, if you like, as the procurer of the service to set some ambitious targets for reducing carbon and actually having a good methodology for carbon accounting. So if you're hearing some frustration in my voice, it is because I'm pretty frustrated about this whole area. I'm thinking of things like our overall council business plan, where we've got a priority about climate change, but the performance measures to support that are still being worked out. And again, I'll be asking for something quite rigorous and stringent there. So I really want us to be ambitious in this area. And there's lots of things in the environment and of the wider city and the region that we do not control directly. But for heaven's sake, our own procurement activity, we must start to set some ambitious targets. And I'm thinking about the massive contracts that we're giving out and things like the ongoing negotiation of the waste disposal procurement. So I really feel that this charter could be really a powerful tool. And if we're going to sign up to a climate emergency declaration and spend 2 years developing an action plan, we must start to be ambitious in the expectations that we're setting for the organisations that are in receipt of the public money that we're dispersing through procurement. Thanks very much.
I think that's one for you, Tristan.
I wouldn't disagree with anything Liz says there. Clearly, we have to be ambitious, and obviously procurement has a big role. And myself and Liz talked about this at the time. I suppose there's a couple of things for me. One is, I said, it's important that there is the sort of social value aspect of the contracts, and where you look for sort of carbon reduction as part of the social value outcome of the contract, and then there is the thing itself. And I think what we need to do much better, what we're going to have to do if we're going to make any progress at all, really, is to start integral to the contract, integral to what it is that we're buying. So to use the example of an athletics stadium, it's not an athletic stadium, it's a carbon neutral athletic stadium, or it's an athletic stadium that builds some resource into it that helps reduce the carbon, that brings carbon emissions down in the city. It's not even net zero, it's a positive contribution. It's that kind of thing that we need service areas to be building into as integral into the thing at which they are purchasing. That's how we're really going to shift this. But yeah, other than that, I haven't really got much to add to Liz's very passionate remarks. I know how passionate she feels about it, and it's shared by lots of members of the organisation. And we have to do it. You know, ultimately, we are going to have to do this. We need to move down this agenda as quickly as we can. And I appreciate the frustration that Liz and I think some members feel about the speed of this. But I think it's going to be a variable picture across different areas. I think in some areas we're going to be able to move, and I think we are already moving at quite significant speed. In other areas, it's much more clunky and a little bit more difficult, and needs a lot of uphill pushing to get us there. But I think we can. The other point I can briefly, and it touches on all of this, is there has been a government green paper on procurement that's been out for consultation around social value, and it covers social value as part of that. And I think in this kind of post-Brexit world, one of the alleged benefits around Brexit is the ability to have more control over procurement processes, and part of that might allow us to do more in terms of social value, in terms of pushing the envelope around social value. Again, it's something that we're looking at, and we haven't seen the white paper yet, so we don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. We've just seen the consultation documents and the green paper, so we'll wait and see where it leaves us and whether it gives us greater freedom around this agenda. There is a lot of talk around simplification in that, but also there's talk about extending the abilities of councils and the abilities of procuring organisations to look at greater social value, etc. So it is one to keep an eye out, and I think there is more that we can do.
Okay, thank you. Liz, you wanted to come back, I think.
Yeah, it was just to say I welcome that clear statement from Tristan, and I think that shows a commitment at leadership level to following through. But my fear is that actually when we get into the nitty-gritty of procurement processes and negotiations, we're still going to get back to the position on property developments. Oh, if we set too many of these stringent targets, it's going to put developers off. That's a discussion that we've had about the development of things like the what was the Athletes Village in Perry Bar, but which is now going to be the development as part of the Perry Bar regeneration, and the waste disposal contracts, where we appear to be allowing the market to determine what would be the targets for carbon reduction within that procurement process, rather than setting some targets ourselves at the beginning. So I think that we need to actually get to the stage where there's confidence and boldness about setting those expectations and taking on some of the value for money arguments and cost arguments, because those have got to be seen in the longer term context about what is the actual overall cost over the life. So over the life of the refurbed Alexander Stadium, is it going to be sustainable? Is it going to have continually reducing levels of carbon emissions and really efficient energy use? And what's the long term cost? So that's where we come back to some serious work on the carbon accounting. So what I think that I feel that actually Tristan himself has moved on actually sort of I would say in what he said to me since we had the discussions around the council motion which accompanied the action plan. So I really welcome that, and you can hear a strong commitment, and I'm really excited about seeing the follow through. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to Shariat, and thank you to Tristan. You've certainly earned your money today, Tristan. A bumper session, so thank you very much. And if you could again pass on our appreciation and congratulations to all the key members of the finance team who have turned around Birmingham's financial performance in recent years. I think we're all very pleased, and it's a great success story for you and your team. Thank you very much indeed.
Will do. Thank you for the kind words and for the support of the committee. It's much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. We now come on to item 6, which is work programme, and I'm going to bring in Emma, who's going to tell us where we are with various stages of our work. Emma.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Hopefully that's working. Yeah, so the work programme is currently as in your information pack. Our next formal meeting will be on the 10th of September, where we're getting an update from the Cabinet Member on Equalities on his work. If you remember, that's a recent addition to this committee's portfolio. There are also a couple of other sessions, informal sessions, that we need formal and informal sessions that we need to get in. One is around customer services. That is due to come back to this committee formally in October, but I know members would welcome an update prior to that. I'm just struggling to get a date at the moment, but I will come back to you as soon as I can. And then the other piece of work that we've got running is, of course, the exempt accommodation. We're now at the point where we've finished most of the evidence gathering in terms of talking to residents and communities. So that evidence pack is being pulled together, and I hope to get that to you in the next couple of weeks. And then we're looking to have a session with cabinet members, officers, to put some of the key points and questions to them. We would like, I think ideally that would work best as a face-to-face session. So we are looking at September. So again, I will come back to you on dates on that. And then the final thing I will mention is the September council meeting will be our next scrutiny business report. I'll be looking at starting to draft that again in the next couple of weeks. And again, really summarising where scrutiny is at the moment and in terms of the work programmes across all 8 committees. Thank you.
Okay, Deirdre.
Thank you. When we're talking to officers about this exempt accommodation, which departments are they from? I was thinking about planning. Is anyone from planning being asked?
So yes, they will. So it will essentially cover, so the housing, relevant housing team, planning is in there, housing benefits section, the benefits team. So it will, what we want is everyone together in one room, really, so we can go through all the issues and get them flushed out.
Yeah, just to add to that, Deirdre, what we've been finding is that one department, I wouldn't say use the word blame, but one department points to another one for the reason why we're in this current state of affairs, and then the finger is pointed back. So the idea is to get them all in the same room so that we can test them in face to face. Who's telling the truth, but who do we believe more than others? So that's the idea. And I don't know whether we want to have licensing as well. I think it would be wise, perhaps, given their role in HMO licensing at the moment. Roger, you wanted to come in. Roger Harmer.
Yeah, thank you. May just be an omission rather in Emma's description, but could we also make sure the police are attending as well? I've got one case at the moment that very much seems like organised mass fraud involving an exempt property. Obviously, we've got to wait and see how the investigation goes, which apparently, one thing I hadn't realised is that such cases, in terms of the benefit fraud aspect, are investigated by DWP, not our housing benefit team, and therefore, you need DWP engaged and understanding the ramifications of these particular investigations to link in as well. There's sort of yet another player involved in this and yet another confusion or Chinese whispers. But
I think Roger, I think you've hit your nail on the head why we've got into this state of affairs, because different not just different parts of the council, but different parts of the public services are responsible for different aspects of exempt accommodation, which is why if you are organised, let's put it like that, you can navigate through each and every one of those safeguards successfully. Mohammed Akhlaq.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Is it just exempt accommodation, or are we including HMOs in that report? Feedback said 2 different things.
Yeah, when we started the process, Mohammed, we had to limit it, because if we were to include HMOs, which is legitimately the role of the housing overview and scrutiny, and Penny's done a lot of work around this, because exempt involved so many departments, and indeed external departments of the local authority. That's why Co-ord took it on. But I know that Penny's done an awful lot of work around HMOs, but this particular report and investigation is limited to exempt. Okay, any other comments on the work programme? Okay, any other urgent business? No. It just leaves me to say thank you very much indeed for your attendance today. I don't know whether I'll see you between now and August. I'm missing the council to, next week, so good luck, and I'm sorry I won't be there. So all the best, everybody. Goodbye.